Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and welcome to another episode of ISTJ Info Dumping, the show where I get to show off my really silly and goofy side that most people think ISTJs don't possess. But said people also think that most Myers-Briggs types are defined by their dominant and secondary functions and don't believe that people can evolve and start to appreciate their tertiary and inferior functions. There are some people that believe that people don't even use their shadow functions, but that's a topic for another video. I've heard it said a lot that inside every ISTJ is an ENFP. And I mean, this can be said about every type, that inside every type is whatever their opposite letter type is. And just about any type, you can kind of see little glimpses of that if you're mature. Take the INFJ, for example. The ESTP side of them is the side of them that actually really enjoys themselves at parties and likes to have fun and live in the moment. They just don't do it very often. They're kind of apprehensive about that kind of mindset. In the same way, ISTJs can have really outside the box ideas and think about these outlandish possibilities, and they can be very convicted about what they feel and what they believe is right. They just hesitate. So, in case you're wondering, no, wait a minute. How can someone with opposite letters have the opposite letter within them? This might be basic knowledge to those of you that have been watching these episodes from the start, but if hypothetically this is your first time on my channel, then the way Myers-Briggs works is that each type with opposite letters has the same first four functions, but in reverse order. So for the ISTJ, their functions are introverted sensing, extroverted thinking, introverted feeling, and extroverted intuition. The ENFP is extroverted intuition, introverted feeling, extroverted thinking, and introverted sensing. So in other words, a complete flop. Now there are the enigma type pairings, which are if you have the first and last letters the same, but the middle ones are different, where all 8 functions are flipped. But with the opposite letter types, there exists a certain level of profound understanding that is very hard for any other type pair to comprehend, besides possibly the ISTJ and the ESTJ. I've been told that those types are perhaps the most similar to each other, except that ISTJs are quieter than the ESTJs. But for the sake of this video, let's see how the ISTJ-ENFP dynamic works and how to a certain extent they can tend to be like each other in specific moments. So the ENFP's dominant function is extroverted intuition. That means that they're constantly idealizing and thinking about new possibilities and what's far-reaching and out there and wild and imaginative. And if I'm exaggerating, I swear I am not. Most ENFPs are actually even more excited and idealistic than even I'm making it out to be, because I'm stretching myself to use my inferior function, whereas for them, it's their natural tendency. And this is what makes them extroverts, is because that possibilities, because it's extroverted intuition, a lot of times those possibilities involve people. And a lot of times those possibilities involve, ooh, this is a cool person, let's interact with them, which is what leads to them having their accidental flirting technique. Unlike the INFPs who lead with introverted feeling, the ENFPs are just going to jump right in because their intuition is like, ooh, possibility, without stopping and considering the consequences. The INFP might say, ooh, I'm shy, and just kind of stop in their tracks. So that can lead to them not necessarily knowing how to present their speech in a manner that doesn't come across as flirting because they don't have extroverted feeling. They're introverted feelers. So for the ENFP, their introverted feeling is what tells them what's right and wrong. But it also leads to them having an authentic need to want to be themselves. Not as much as the INFPs, where they live in that reality, where if they are sad, then it is like literally impossible to convince them otherwise, because that is how they feel, and they're gonna be sad, darn it. The ENFP's kind of like that too, but they're first gonna check in with their intuition to see if there's a cool idea, but then after they jump into it, then their introverted feeling is going to introspect and say, was that really what made the most sense to me? So it can lead to them coming across as selfless when they're in their more extroverted stages, but then once they introspect, then you see the more quiet, reserved side. Now, what does this have to do with the ISTJ, you might be wondering? Well, ISTJs have their moments like that too. If you get an ISTJ at a party, they can do some really outlandish jokes. When I'm around my sister, she's actually thought I was an extrovert on numerous occasions because sometimes I'll just have the craziest things to say about her. Like, one time we were on our way to church and she just said, like, well, darn it, I have to carry a purse because I don't have pockets. And I just said, we won't take it personally. And she's just like, oh, Paul, that was bad. So in that respect, that was an outside the box type of joke. Also, ISTJs like to think about possibilities too. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be jumping at them like the ENFP is, because extroverted intuitions are inferior function. Instead of having this joyful possibilities, ISTJs are going to be like, possibilities. So that's why if you present an ISTJ with a new idea, rather than relishing in it, they're going to be scared of it. So, for instance, say you take an ISTJ and an ENFP at the park. I'm actually recalling the park in my brain right now. I'm not just picturing an abstract park. Say we're at the park in my brain, and there's some girls walking across the street. My ENFP friend says, hey, look, Paul, potential people for a prayer meeting. Let's invite them over. So that extroverted intuition is thinking about the possibility of more people. My brain thinks about the possibility of, oh, shoot, those girls probably think that we're terrible people, and then they'll probably say no, and what if they hate us? So whereas he is having an optimistic view of the future, I am having a pessimistic view. In the same way, if you take the introverted feeling, ENFPs are always double checking what they feel about things and saying what is right to me? What does this mean? ISTJs do that as well, but that's going to be less of a priority to them. Now, they say that when two types are both perceivers, then their judging functions are going to appear relatively the same if they're a well-developed person. So an ENFP and an ISTJ aren't going to look too much different with regards to how their introverted feeling works, because they're only one slot apart in the function stack. But to an ISTJ, if you take me as a basis, like, I do what makes me happy on YouTube, and even if a fan suggests something that's unfamiliar, and I say, well, I want to please my fans, at the same time, I'm going to want to please me first, then the fans. So that introverted feeling is saying, what feels right to me personally? But then there are times where sometimes I will ignore my personal feelings, not for the sake of the group, like the extroverted feelers do, but for the sake of a more objective conclusion. Like, for example, let's say, I didn't like the fact that I had brown hair. I mean, I love the fact that I have brown hair, but I'm just using an example here. Let's say that I didn't like the fact that I had brown hair, and I went into the clothing store, and I saw, ooh, hair dye. Ooh, I can make my hair blue. That's my favorite color. But look at the price. That's just too darn expensive. If I keep dyeing my hair blue, because from what I've heard you have to keep dyeing your hair, that'll cost money. And if I spend too much money, then I won't be able to survive. I'd better hold off on this, because that's dangerous if I keep overspending. So you see how my desire is very strong for my favorite color, but my desire for what is objective, which is you lose money if you buy too much stuff. You can't deny that. That's an objective truth. The ISTJ is going to say, let's put our feelings on the back burner and focus on what's realistic. Or, to use an even more morbid example, let's say the ISTJ is a sex-hungry maniac, but then they realize that the laws of oxytocin come in, and that oxytocin increases trust but decreases critical thinking. They might be like, I really want to have sex at the moment, but then it would decrease my critical thinking skills. And that would be unfortunate because I really need to make sure that I'm doing things the way they're supposed to be doing. So for the sake of preserving my brain cells, I will refrain from doing what I want to do. Whereas I think the ENFPs would have a harder time resisting. That being said, ISTJs never tell lies, and they always want people to be honest. So in that respect, that's their introverted feeling showing off more subtly. That need for authenticity, for the truth, for, well, it's gotta be the way that it is. In a certain extent, that's their introverted feeling talking. Now, for the ENFPs, they can show their introverted sensing and extroverted thinking in subtle ways as well. But again, they're afraid of that. In fact, a lot of ENFPs actually hate talking about the Myers-Briggs because that's too compartmentalizing. ISTJs thrive on putting people in boxes and saying, like, you are an INFJ, so therefore you are an overthinker. They tend to have this very, like, you cannot have two extremes whatsoever. ENFPs especially hate that. They'll say, how dare you put me in a box? Please allow me to be free. And that also leads to them hating social conventions. Whereas ISTJs are like, what does society say that I should do? What is the right thing to do? ENFPs will say, that's too limiting. Let me be free. Let me be a bird. Don't put me in a cage. But there can be moments where they develop those inferior functions and actually make a difference. ENFPs that have developed their extroverted thinking can get things done as opposed to just being stuck in their head like the INFPs and the INTPs do. If an ENFP says, wouldn't it be cool if we went to the cider mill together? They'll say, well, let's not just think about it, let's do it. And they can potentially even order people around and say, like, you, get us the tickets. Of course, they won't say it as mean as the ESTJs do, but they're definitely capable of it. In fact, one of my ENFP friends called me up the other day. Why do I always use the right hand? I always talk on the phone with my left hand. And he's... Speaking of my phone, I just got a text message. He called me up and he said, hey, Paul, let's go to the cider mill. And knowing him, now that he's developed his extroverted thinking, he's not just saying that to theorize. He is actually going to go on his phone and he's going to look up where the closest cider mill is, and he's going to look up the prices, and he's going to say, this is the most effective method to be used, which is what an ISTJ does naturally. But for an ENFP, they have to learn that skill. In the same way, their introverted sensing, even if they don't use it as much as me to put everything into categories, it gives them their moments of reminiscing. Take Danielle and Matt again as an example. There are moments where they will recall very specific moments in our friendship, and I'm sure if you watch my 10-year friendiversary with Danielle, you'll see her doing just that. She'll say, like, oh my gosh, Paul, I remember when we went to the retreat together, and I remember we had so much fun, and I also remember that I met you from this specific website. So they do have the ability to remember specific things. It's just that most of the time their memory is like a goldfish, and it takes them a while to get into the habit of remembering every little fact. But they're capable of it. For them, it's just going to come from their introverted feeling of, did this make me feel good at the time? Therefore, I will remember it. So ISTJs, they just remember everything because their extroverted thinking is going to think about how things should be. And so they don't have that logical filter of, this is irrelevant, like the other types do. They're going to say, well, you can't just ignore the facts. So I hope that gave you guys a little bit of an insight on how opposite types really can act like each other when they want to, and that they can really learn from each other. Like, ISTJs and ENFPs, I personally think, make a great duo, and most of my best friends are ENFPs. I think I have at least 4 or 5 off the top of my head, and probably more because I haven't really counted. So what about you? Do you have that kind of really cool sort of understanding relationship with your opposite type? Do you say, oh my gosh, I can relate to using their inferior function as my top? Let me know in the comment section, and until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and if I can pretend to be an ENFP for a moment, yay! Comments! Thank you so much, guys! Bye.